What happens when a single movie does more than fail? What happens when it destroys careers and drains fortunes? These are not ordinary flops. These are financial disasters that pushed A-list stars into survival mode. Some lost millions, some lost everything, and some spent years fighting their way back. Stay with this list because the deeper we go, the more shocking the financial fallout becomes. Number 13. One from the Heart, 1982. Francis Ford Coppola, a dream built on neon and obsession. That is how One from the Heart began. Not as a film, but as a gamble. Coppola was not just directing, he was building a future. He poured his own money into American zoetrope. He wanted to break the system, control everything, own everything. The problem is simple. When you bet everything you own on one film, you cannot afford failure, and failure is exactly what arrived. The film cost around $26 million. It barely made a fraction back. The numbers did not just disappoint. They collapsed. What followed was not a quiet setback. It was financial devastation. Coppola was buried under debt, loans stacked on top of loans. His studio vision shattered. This was not theory. This was documented collapse. He spent years directing studio films he did not even want to make, not for art, for survival. This is one of the rare cases where a box office bomb did not just damage a career. It forced a legendary filmmaker into a financial corner. He had to fight his way out project by project, payment by payment. The irony is brutal. The man who helped define modern cinema was reduced to rebuilding his finances one job at a time, not because he lost talent, but because one film failed at the worst possible scale. This is what the title truly means. Not embarrassment, not bad reviews, but a collapse so deep that it rewrites your entire life. Number 12, Boxing, Helena, 1993, Kim Basinger. This story does not begin with a flop. It begins with a decision. Kim Basinger agreed to star in Boxing Helena. Then she walked away. And that one move triggered a chain reaction that would destroy her financially. The producers did not let it go. They sued, and they won. The court ordered Basinger to pay millions in damages, over $8 million. For an actor at the peak of fame, this should have been survivable. But it was not. Why? Because the timing was ruthless. Basinger had invested heavily in real estate. She had financial commitments already stretching her resources. The lawsuit hit like a financial shockwave. Suddenly, she was facing obligations she could not meet. The result was not speculation, it was official. Kim Basinger filed for bankruptcy in 1993, one of the few A-list stars to do so during peak visibility. This is what makes this case different. The financial collapse is directly tied to a single production, not box office numbers, not audience rejection, but the fallout of a film that never even happened with her in it. The lesson here is sharper than most. In Hollywood, the risk is not always on screen. Sometimes it is in the contract. And when it goes wrong, it does not damage your reputation first. It hits your bank account hard. And in this case, it was enough to push a major star into financial collapse. Number 11, Driven, 2001, Sylvester Stallone. Speed was meant to restore control. That was the pitch behind Driven. Sylvester Stallone did not just star. He wrote the script. He shaped the narrative. He treated the film like a calculated return to dominance. But the moment it reached audiences, everything stalled. Weak reception, flat earnings. A project designed to revive a career instead exposed how fragile that career had become. Timing is everything in this story. Stallone was not entering from a position of strength. The late 1990s had already chipped away at his financial stability. Several films had underperformed. The reliable paydays were shrinking. The industry was shifting away from him. Driven did not create the problem. It magnified it. This failure pushed him deeper into a period where financial pressure was real and sustained. Reports from that era point to earlier financial strain and aggressive spending patterns that had already placed him in a vulnerable position. The result was not a public bankruptcy filing. It was something quieter but just as telling. Stallone had to step back. Big roles slowed. The income flow tightened. The recovery would not come quickly. Years later, he rebuilt himself through legacy projects and smart positioning. But that comeback only makes sense when you understand the collapse that came before it. This is how financial decline works in Hollywood. Not always through one explosion, but through one failure that lands at exactly the wrong moment and forces a star into survival mode. Number 10, Heaven's Gate, 1980, Michael Cimino. Control can destroy you when it goes unchecked. That is the story of Heaven's Gate. Michael Cimino came off the success of The Deer Hunter with absolute authority. He was given freedom few directors ever receive. What followed was excess, endless takes, expanding sets, delays that spiraled into chaos. The budget climbed far beyond expectations. Every day added more cost. Every decision pushed the film closer to disaster. When it finally released, the reaction was brutal. Critics rejected it. Audiences stayed away. The box office numbers were catastrophic. United Artists collapsed under the weight of the failure. One film brought down a historic studio. For Cimino, the damage was personal. His reputation collapsed overnight, but more importantly, his financial stability vanished. The opportunities that once came easily disappeared. The income that sustained him dried up. This was not just a career setback. It was a financial collapse that forced him into years of instability. He struggled to regain footing in an industry that no longer trusted him. The scale of the failure matters. This was not a modest loss. It was a public implosion tied directly to one project that went out of control. And in Hollywood, when control turns into excess, the fall is not gradual. It is immediate. It is unforgiving. And for Cimino, it was enough to erase both power and financial security in a single moment. Number 9. Battlefield Earth, 2000. John Travolta. This was not just a role. This was a personal mission. John Travolta had been trying to bring Battlefield Earth to life for years. He believed in it. He backed it. He tied his name to it in a way most stars avoid. When the film finally arrived, the collapse was immediate. Critics attacked it. Audiences rejected it. The box office never had a chance to recover. What was supposed to be a passion project turned into one of the most infamous failures in modern Hollywood. The financial damage extended beyond reputation. The production company behind the film collapsed under legal and financial pressure. Lawsuits followed. Investigations exposed inflated budgets and questionable accounting practices. The fallout spread across the entire project. For Travolta, the impact was direct. He did not declare bankruptcy, but the financial losses were real, and the damage to his earning power was undeniable. His momentum from the 1990s comeback slowed sharply. High-paying roles became harder to secure. The industry no longer treated his involvement as a guarantee of profit. This is where the title connects. Not every collapse ends in a legal filing. Sometimes it shows up as a sudden drop in value, a shrinking paycheck, a career that must rebuild from a weakened position. Travolta eventually recovered. But recovery only matters because the fall was real. And Battlefield Earth remains the moment where belief turned into financial risk at the worst possible scale. Number 8. Town & Country, 2001. Warren Beatty. Some failures are loud, others are slow and expensive. Town & Country was both. What started as a romantic comedy turned into a production nightmare. Reshoots dragged on for years. Costs kept rising. The budget crossed $100 million. By the time the film reached theaters, it was already wounded. The release was quiet. The audience response was colder than expected, and the box office numbers confirmed the worst. It earned only a fraction of what it cost. For Warren Beatty, this was not just another film. It was a turning point. He had spent years developing it. His reputation was tied to its success. When it failed, the consequences were immediate. The industry changed how it saw him. The offers slowed. The large-scale leading roles disappeared. The kind of financial security that comes from consistent major projects began to fade. This is how financial collapse can look at the top level. Not a sudden bankruptcy filing, but a shutdown of income streams that once seemed permanent. Beatty did not lose everything overnight, but he lost something just as important: his position as a bankable leading man. And once that disappears, the financial impact follows quietly but relentlessly. One film, one overextended production, and the result was a long-term decline that reshaped both career. Number 7. The Adventures of Pluto Nash, 2002. Eddie Murphy. This was supposed to be safe, a comedy, a familiar lane, a proven star. That is what makes The Adventures of Pluto Nash so shocking. It did not just fail. It collapsed at a historic level. The budget crossed $100 million. The return barely touched a fraction of that. The gap between cost and earnings was not just wide, it was catastrophic. One of the biggest financial losses ever recorded for a studio comedy. For Eddie Murphy, the timing made it worse. He was still a major draw, still a reliable name. But this film cracked that image. Studios became cautious. Projects that once moved quickly now faced hesitation. The guaranteed paydays began to shrink. Murphy did not declare bankruptcy, but that is not the only way financial damage shows up. When your value drops, your income follows. When fewer films succeed, the financial pressure builds. Quietly, consistently. This film marked the beginning of a period where Murphy shifted towards safer roles. Voice work, family films, controlled risks. That shift was not random. It was a response to a loss that proved even a top star could miscalculate. The scale of the failure matters here, not because it erased his wealth overnight, but because it changed how the industry calculated his worth. And once that calculation changes, the financial consequences do not need headlines. They unfold in smaller contracts, fewer opportunities, and a long, slow rebuilding process that starts the moment the numbers come in. Number 6. Cutthroat Island, 1995. Geena Davis. This was ambition without restraint. A pirate epic designed to revive a genre. Huge sets, large-scale action, a budget that kept climbing until it reached a point where success was no longer optional. It was necessary for survival, but survival never came. Cutthroat Island failed before it even had a chance to recover. The studio behind it, Carolco Pictures, was already under pressure. When the film collapsed at the box office, it pushed the company over the edge. Bankruptcy followed. For Gina Davis, the damage was immediate and personal. She was not just starring, she was carrying the film as a leading figure in a high-risk project. When it failed, the industry reaction was swift. The offers slowed. The trust disappeared. The position she once held as a major box office presence began to fade. This is where financial collapse takes a different form. Not through personal bankruptcy, but through the sudden loss of earning power. A star's income depends on momentum, on perception, on belief that they can carry a film. Cutthroat Island shattered that belief. Davis did not lose everything in one moment, but she lost access to the kind of roles that sustain long-term financial security. And in Hollywood, that loss can be just as damaging as any legal bankruptcy. One film, one failed gamble, and the cost was measured not just in money but in opportunity that never returned. Number 5. Gigli. 2003, Ben Affleck. This was supposed to be unstoppable. Two massive stars, endless media attention, a film surrounded by hype before a single ticket was sold. But hype is not protection, and Gigli proved that brutally. The moment it released, the reaction was immediate. Critics dismantled it. Audiences avoided it. The box office collapsed almost instantly. A $75 million production that barely recovered anything close to its cost. For Ben Affleck, the damage went beyond one weekend. He was at the center of the storm. His image was everywhere. The failure became personal. Studios began to question his reliability as a leading man. The offers changed. The scale of projects shrank. This is where financial decline becomes real, not through one lost paycheck, but through the disappearance of future income. The kind of roles that once guaranteed millions were no longer automatic. Each new project carried risk. Each decision carried pressure. Affleck did not file for bankruptcy, but he entered a phase where his earning power dropped sharply. He had to step away from the spotlight, rebuild slowly, redirect his career toward directing where control could replace lost trust. The comeback would come years later, but that comeback only matters because of how far he fell. Gigli did not just fail. It reset a career at its peak and forced a star into a financial and professional rebuild that took years to complete. Number 4. The Cotton Club, 1984. Francis Ford Coppola. Some losses do not come alone. They arrive in waves. And for Francis Ford Coppola, the Cotton Club was another wave crashing into an already fragile financial situation. The production itself was troubled from the beginning. Budget issues, behind-the-scenes tension, external influences that complicated decisions. The cost kept rising while control slipped further away. When the film released, it did not deliver the financial recovery Coppola needed. It underperformed, and that underperformance mattered more than usual because this was not an isolated project. It came after earlier financial damage that had already placed him under pressure. The result was a prolonged financial struggle. Debt remained. Obligations continued. Coppola had to keep working, not for creative ambition, but to stabilize his finances. Film after film became part of a larger effort to recover from losses that refused to disappear. This is what makes this entry align with the title. It is not about one explosion. It is about a failure that deepens an existing financial crisis and keeps a major filmmaker trapped in recovery mode. Coppola eventually rebuilt. But that rebuild required years of compromise and persistence. The Cotton Club stands as proof that even the greatest names are not immune. When the numbers fail and the timing is wrong, the financial consequences do not fade. They follow, and they demand repayment long after the credits roll. Number 3. Hudson Hawk, 1991. Bruce Willis. Confidence can be expensive. That is the story of Hudson Hawk. Bruce Willis was not just starring. He was shaping the tone, influencing the script, pushing a strange mix of action and comedy that felt unlike anything else at the time. The risk was bold. The execution divided audiences instantly. Critics rejected it. The box office followed. What was meant to be a stylish experiment turned into a financial misfire that no one could ignore. For Willis, the impact was immediate. He had been riding high on success, strong films, strong paychecks, a reputation that guaranteed attention. But this failure introduced doubt. Studios became cautious. The idea that his name alone could carry a film started to weaken. Financially, the loss was personal. Reports confirm he had a stake in the project and took a hit when it failed. It did not push him into formal bankruptcy, but it cut into his earnings and forced a shift in how he approached future roles. This is where the title connects. Financial collapse is not always a legal declaration. Sometimes it is a sudden drop in value, a moment where the numbers no longer justify the same level of investment. Willis recovered. He adjusted. He chose roles that rebuilt trust. But that recovery only makes sense when you understand the setback that forced it. Hudson Hawk stands as a reminder that even at the top, one miscalculation can reshape both career and financial trajectory in ways that take years to correct. Number 2. Waterworld, 1995. Kevin Costner. Scale can become a trap. Waterworld was designed to be massive. Huge sets built on water, complex shoots, endless logistical challenges. Every day of production added more cost. The budget climbed higher and higher until the film carried enormous financial pressure before it even reached theaters. When it finally released, the response was mixed. The box office was not strong enough to match expectations. The narrative quickly turned negative. Headlines focused on cost, on chaos, on the idea that the film had failed to justify its scale. For Kevin Costner, this moment was critical. He was not just the star, he was deeply connected to the production. The perception of failure attached directly to him. That perception mattered financially. The offers began to shift. The guaranteed success image faded. Projects became riskier from a studio perspective. And when studios see risk, they adjust budgets, they adjust salaries, they adjust everything. Costner did not file for bankruptcy, but he entered a period where financial stability was no longer automatic. The pressure increased. The margin for error disappeared. This is how a single film can alter a financial trajectory, not by wiping everything out instantly, but by changing how the industry calculates your worth. Waterworld became that moment, a high-risk gamble that did not deliver and forced a major star into a more uncertain financial future. Number 1. The Postman, 1997. Kevin Costner. Some failures echo louder when they come twice. That is exactly what happened with The Postman. After the financial turbulence of Waterworld, expectations were already fragile. This film was supposed to restore confidence. Instead, it deepened the damage. The budget was large. The ambition was serious. Costner once again stepped into a project that demanded belief from both audiences and studios. But belief never arrived. The film struggled at the box office. The returns were nowhere near enough to justify the cost. This is where the real impact begins. One failure can be dismissed. 2 in a row changes everything. The industry recalculates fast. Studios reduce risk. Salaries shrink. Opportunities narrow. For Costner, this became a defining financial moment. The perception of him as a guaranteed draw collapsed, and when that perception disappears, the financial consequences follow quietly but relentlessly. He did not declare bankruptcy, but the shift was undeniable. The kind of projects that once came easily were no longer available. The earning power that defined his peak years weakened. Recovery took time, careful choices, a gradual rebuild of trust, but none of that erases what happened here. The Postman did not just fail. It confirmed a pattern. And in Hollywood, once a pattern is confirmed, the financial impact is unavoidable. It reshapes careers, it reshapes income, and it forces even the biggest stars to start proving themselves all over again. Hollywood sells success, but it rarely shows the cost of failure. These films prove that one wrong gamble can change everything. If this surprised you, drop your thoughts below and tell us which collapse shocked you most. And if you want more deep dives into hidden Hollywood truths, subscribe and stay tuned.